Okay, welcome back to part two. The video segment I'm going to show you in this part runs about almost 11 minutes, and I chose not to break it up purposely because it flows together very nicely. It starts out with the U.S. reaction to the communist takeover of Czechoslovakia and how Congress reacts to that. So I'd like you to think about that and think about there's still a group of people in Congress that have been there since the 1920s. They used to cause problems for Roosevelt. Think about this. It's 1947, 47, 48, that time frame, and there's still a group of people that don't want the U.S. involved in things, all right? It then will discuss the initial application of the Marshall Plan. See how it works with countries. It will take you through Greece, through France, and Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia today is Serbia and that whole area. But back in the 1940s, that area was called Yugoslavia. It was under the control of a guy by the name of Marshal Tito, T-I-T-O. He was communist, but he wasn't as staunch a communist as Stalin was, and therefore he runs afoul of Stalin. Okay, so again, take a look at this, and then I'll come back at the end of the 10-minute block after the video is shown and talk a little bit more.
The communist takeover in Prague shocked Washington. There, the case for Marshall aid was still being argued before a partly isolationist Congress.
The Soviet Union and its agents have destroyed the independence and democratic character of a whole series of nations in Eastern and Central Europe. It is this ruthless course of action and the clear design to extend it to the remaining free nations of Europe that have brought about the critical situation in Europe today.
It was touch and go when both houses of Congress were finally considering the legislation. Then the Czech coup occurred, and that was the final straw, because even the isolationists, or most of them, could see that the Russians were advancing westward with the takeover in Czechoslovakia and so on. So it helped very importantly to pass the legislation.
On April 3, 1948, Congress approved $5 billion of Marshall aid. The Marshall Plan was born from the need to feed the hungry and to prevent communism spreading over Europe. "20% of the aid were loans, 80% grants. The first shipments were foods and fertilizers. Next, machines to improve agricultural efficiency. In the 4 years of the plan, the Marshall Agency spent $13.5 billion in 16 countries.
Fewer people spent more money in that agency than ever before or since in the United States government. It was an extraordinary performance.
Europe's purchase of American goods and machinery redirected many Marshall aid dollars back into American industry, fueling a post-war boom.
Most people I knew felt that the generosity of Americans was a self-serving one, in the sense that they thought of Europe as an outlet for their goods, as a market to export stuff. And we thought that we could see that in the types of things that they wanted us to buy with the money that they lent us.
One of the countries most in need of help was Greece, devastated by the Nazi occupation and years of civil war. In the north, government troops still hunted out communist guerrillas.
Greece, of course, emerged from the war in a terrible state. Probably 2,000 of the nation's villages had been razed and burnt to the ground by the reprisal raids of the Nazis. The consequence of the Civil War was to add to that terribly shredded kind of social fabric.
During the 4 years of the Marshall Plan, Greece received nearly $700 million of economic assistance. Young Americans were thrust into positions of heavy responsibility.
I was the youngest member of the Marshall Plan mission in Greece. I arrived there at the age of 23, and to my astonishment, a year later, at age 24, there I was in charge of the Greek import program. The range of projects which we engaged in were all over the map and all over every single sector of the economy. And one could say that America fed and fueled and clothed the Greek nation.
In the hill villages of northern Greece emerging from civil war, the Marshall Planners came up with a scheme to meet a local need.
During the war and during the Civil War, one of the major elements destroyed was the farm draft animal. One of the decisions was to import that which we were accustomed to, which was the Missouri mule. And the Missouri mule is not only cantankerous, he's big.
American mules arrived in Greece after a long sea voyage.
The village leaders informed us about the mules. We went down to the cooperative in Xanthi, and that's where they gave us the mules.
The farmers drew lots.
You took a piece of paper with the number of the mule written on it. Then you went to the overseer. He looked at your paper and gave the mule with that number to you. And then he said, "Take it."
The only problem was that the American mules were very much larger than the animals local farmers were used to.
The mules were very good. They were a bit wild, but slowly we got them under control. They were fat and big, and we began to use the mules to plough. They were very good. They gave me a superb mule, and we started to plough. The American mules were best. They were from the stable, well-fed and fat. You could put 200 kilos on them, and they could take it. Our own mules were small. We were very thankful. How could we not be thankful, since we had nothing? Long live America.
Industrial Europe faced other problems. France, 1947. Workers at the Renault factory near Paris went on strike. When communist ministers backed them, they were expelled from the government. Several months of disruption followed. Strikes spread. In the fall, 3 million workers took to the streets.
We had a lot of sympathy for the strikers because we felt that they were poorly paid, and we felt that the government wouldn't do anything for them unless they put pressure on the government.
Ministers feared civil war. The United States made it clear to Paris that there would be no Marshall aid to French industry until the government had the communist threat under control. Acts of sabotage culminated in the derailing of an express train, causing 20 deaths. The strikers lost popular support. The disruption ended. The French Fourth Republic would now receive Marshall aid, $2.7 billion of it. Yugoslavia had gone communist at the end of the war, without help from Moscow. The Yugoslav leader, Tito, became an ally of Stalin, but it was an uneasy alliance.
Tito, in Stalin's view, was acquiring more and more an independent position in various ways, including international affairs. Tito didn't consult or seek advice from Stalin in advance. He was moving further and further away from the socialist direction.
The split came in 1948, when Stalin expelled Tito from the Comintern. Following the rift, Tito turned to the West. After a series of disastrous harvests, Tito requested American economic assistance. In 1950, he signed an agreement with the United States government. Yugoslavia emerged from behind the Iron Curtain. American agents distributed more than $150 million worth of aid.
This was not totally an altruistic effort, the United States. It had enormous self-interest in the success of the Marshall Plan. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been undertaken. America had a vital stake in the recovery of Western Europe. If the United States had allowed Europe to collapse, it would have cost us much more than what we spent on the Marshall Plan. We were doing well by doing good.
But as well as doing good, Washington was preparing other tactics.
All right, so break into your groups or stay in your groups, whatever you are, and think about this. You have three examples. You have Greece, France, and Yugoslavia. How altruistic are we in the Marshall Plan? And was there anything wrong if we weren't? Think about this, okay? Take a few minutes, talk about it amongst yourselves, and then when you're done, I'd like you to move on to the next one, part 3.